Episode 139 of CppCast with guest Conor Hoekstra, recorded February 22nd, 2018. CppCast is sponsored by ThinkCell Software. They're looking for developers that would want to work on extremely challenging C++ development tasks. In their Berlin-based office, they work with no deadlines, no overtime, and no meetings. If this is for you, go to thinkcell.com/CppCast and apply today. CppCast is also sponsored by Embo++. The upcoming conference will be held in Bochum, Germany from March 9th to 11th. Meet other embedded systems developers working on microcontrollers, alternative kernels, and highly customizable zero-cost library designs. Get your ticket today at embo.io. In this episode, we talk about Google's Summer of Code and some conference news. Then we talk to Conor Hoekstra. Conor tells us about the world of competitive coding and more. Welcome to episode 139 of CppCast, the only podcast for C++ developers by C++ developers. I'm your host, Rob Irving, joined by my co-host, Jason Turner. Jason, how you doing today?
Doing good. I am super tired. I plan to stay awake for the whole episode, though. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, so what have you been up to this week?
I've been doing training this week at a local company, and I will say, I've been thinking about this today. The C++ community in Denver is really shockingly small. So the company that I am doing training at had just interviewed someone, or they told me that they needed to go do an interview. And I'm like, oh, well, who is it? This community is actually pretty small. And they're like, oh, there's no way you know the person's name. And I'm like, no, go ahead, lay it on me. So he tells me the name. I'm like, yeah, I totally worked with him 8 years ago at a different company. And there's a fair number of C++ jobs that are open here right now, so it's all kind of surprising to me and interesting. But yes, I actually did know the person they were interviewing today, and I got to wave at him as he walked past the training room. So, yeah.
Small world.
Yeah.
Okay, well, at the top of our episode, I'd like to read a piece of feedback. This week, we got an email from Stefan in Norway, saying, hi, I love the show. I was a bit disappointed, though, in the way you guys glossed over the SpaceX Falcon Heavy launch, being American and all. I believe some of the developers from SpaceX had an AMA on Reddit at some point and spoke about using mainly C++. It would be interesting maybe to listen to one of them on the show. I did try to find that Reddit AMA, and it looks like it was actually like 5 years ago. So I'm not sure if it would be worth trying to contact any of those Reddit users if those accounts are active or whatever. But it would be great to have someone from SpaceX on the show to talk about, some of the recent news and what they're working on over there from a C++ perspective.
Maybe they're listeners and one of them will reach out to us.
Yeah, if anyone is there at SpaceX listening to the show, or if anyone knows someone from SpaceX and can put us in touch, then please reach out. Be great to have him on.
Yeah, and I don't really feel like we glossed over it, but I don't remember how much time we spent on it, though.
It was impressive to watch. I don't think we glossed over it, but we didn't spend a show about it.
It was truly impressive to watch live.
Yeah. Well,
yeah. There's still a car, on its orbit heading towards Mars at the moment. It's ridiculous.
I really love some of those memes with Spaceman going around the globe. It was fantastic.
Oh, I don't think I've seen any of the Spaceman memes, but that sounds like it could be fun.
Could be. Okay, well, we'd love to hear your thoughts about the show as well. You can always reach out to us on Facebook, Twitter, or email us at feedback@cppcast.com. And don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes. Joining us today is Conor Hoekstra. Conor works at Moody's Analytics as a C++ software developer, helping maintain and develop an insurance software program called Axis. Wanting to develop better algorithm and data structure knowledge, he started using online sites like HackerRank and LeetCode to do so. He now has a YouTube channel where he reviews the contests from the last week of competitive coding sites like HackerRank, LeetCode, topcoder, and Codeforces, and also covers solutions to the trickier problems. Conor, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So this insurance system that you're working on, is this something that is sold to insurance companies, or it's something that's used internally? I don't know. I mean, I'm not familiar with Moody's analytics, so.
It's sold to insurance companies, but we actively maintain it. So I think once or twice a month we release like updated versions of the program, and people can download that and convert their data sets. And we're always adding new features and fixing small issues with it. And so the insurance companies, they use it to value their sort of existing policies and price their new products.
I have a little bit of experience in the insurance world, and saying that you release an update every couple of months, that sounds astoundingly fast for that world.
Actually, every couple of weeks.
Every couple of weeks, sorry.
Yeah, we have something called a continuous release cycle, and they capture, I think, daily, and at least 2 or 3 times a month they make a release. Yeah, our quality assurance team that's responsible for that is always very busy.
I imagine. So do your users actually update every time there's a release, or do they set themselves on their own schedule?
It depends. So we have the support matrix that we have goes back, I think, 2 years. So we usually have 1 or 2 maintained versions, which are like our numbered versions. So we have like 2017.99901 that we will continuously fix the bugs for, but we won't add new features to. And then every month, a couple new release versions will come out. So I think we're on 2018, 27.01 or something like that. And so it depends on the client. There are a lot of insurance companies that they stick with the maintained versions, and then once every 2 or 3 years they have to get like approval from corporate, and then they'll upgrade, and then they'll get a whole bunch of new features at once. And then there's other insurance companies that they live more on they live off of the newer updates because they need all the new functionality that's getting put into the system.
Okay, now I'm curious, and perhaps we could save some of this for the interview, but I'm still just going to go ahead and jump into it.
Sure.
In our last interview, we discussed maintaining ABI compatibility across versions, API versus ABI. Now, this it sounds like is a product, not a library that they're using.
Correct. Yeah, we the clients, they download like an executable.
So from your perspective, even though you're making these releases all the time, you never have to worry about, like, you can change your API and ABI like every 5 minutes, and your client's never going to care.
I think that's mostly the case, yeah.
I guess changing the data sets is kind of the more larger concern. Make sure you have compatibility between versions.
Yeah, so it's actually one of the biggest features, I guess, of this industry is we have 2 main competitors, and they have what are called open systems. So they release more libraries that then the user can go in and mess around with the code, and they can implement their own custom functionality. But at Moody's Analytics, their software, it's a closed system. So they don't like to say black box; they like to say glass box. So we provide like a lot of reconciliation reports, but the user can't actually go in and change the way that we've implemented the calculations. We offer things called formula tables where users can write their own custom scripts to sort of execute their own proprietary calculations, but at the end of the day, like, the source code is ours and they can't touch it. Whereas our competitors, you can touch their source code. But due to that and things that have happened in the industry, we're doing really well because of that. Because upgrading is like, it's a breeze. Their data, like anything that they use from going all the way back to 2012, they can just upgrade. Whereas open source, when you go and change the source code and then the vendor releases an update, it's a mess to go and upgrade that. So it's worked out really well for us.
Okay. I'm assuming I'm not asking a question that would be proprietary information, but you can stop me if I am. But how are these scripts written that your users can actually write?
I think we were using like a third-party library. I'm not sure if it's VB.net but it's something like that. And so we're using, I think it's a third-party library and compiler for that.
Okay.
That's not part of the work that I work on. That's the systems guys that do that. I work more on like the calculation engine of the software program.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay, well, Conor, we got a couple news articles to discuss. Feel free to comment on any of these, and then we'll start talking more about the competitive coding that you have an interest in, okay?
Okay, definitely.
Okay, so this first one is from Facebook AI Research announcing Tensor Comprehensions, which is a C++ library and mathematical language that they are releasing. And it seems like the goal of this is to help researchers so that they don't need to be writing their own, C++ code, but they can write in this mathematical language very similar to, what they're used to being able to write in. And it gets like converted into C++ code using this library. At least that's my understanding of it. Does that sound right to the two of you?
I have no idea.
It's a long article. It's a bit over my head, to be honest with you.
I understand here that it contains a polyhedral just-in-time compiler based on a integer set library, which I don't know what that means. I can honestly say.
It sounded very impressive.
It does sound impressive. I have no experience with artificial intelligence. Do you, Connor?
No, I haven't done any CUDA programming. It's on my list of things to do, but I'm sure there's some people out there that are very, very happy that this has been released.
Right.
Yeah, they're offering order of magnitude productivity gains, and I know mathematical researchers. I think we've had other guests on the show that have talked about how they, C++ is pretty foreign to them, so this should really help them do their work, which is great.
All right, great. So a topic none of us knew anything about.
Okay, well, you want to introduce the next one, Jason, about Google Summer of Code?
Yeah, I mean, why not? So if you're not familiar with the Google Summer of Code, every year for a long time now, and just looking at this history, at least the last 12 years, they sponsor projects around the world where they pay students to work on some open source project, basically. So GCC has just announced that they have been accepted for Google Summer of Code, and they're looking for applications. And I think this seems like a good opportunity for our listeners that are interested in compilers and our students.
Yeah, absolutely. And the one thing worth mentioning is they come out with a list of possible project ideas, and that if you decide to submit yourself to join the Google Summer of Code and get funding for this, then you would be paired with a mentor. And those mentors have already submitted possible project ideas. So you don't need to come up with something on your own. You can kind of look and see if this is something you'd be interested in contributing to, and maybe you can get paired with a mentor, right?
Yeah, and it looks like they've got some suggestions for improving their sanitizer library and adding a fuzzer, which Clang already has -f sanitizer equals fuzzer, so Clang has fuzzing built into the sanitizer engine. Parallel compilation of executables, of C++ files. Looks pretty cool.
Yeah.
Options.
Absolutely. Okay, next, Pacific has announced that they're going to be doing their next conference October 18th and 19th in Sydney this year. Last year was in New Zealand, right, Jason? Or was it?
Yes, it was in Christchurch, New Zealand.
Okay, so they're keeping it in the general area of the Pacific, but they're moving from New Zealand to Sydney, Australia. So I guess they're targeting maybe a larger audience, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, Sydney's a considerably larger city than Christchurch. And to those who are in the area, if I understand correctly, like the Air New Zealand flights between Sydney and New Zealand are pretty darn cheap, so it should be pretty accessible to people that are in New Zealand still also.
Yeah. And in addition to just announcing the dates, they're saying they're looking for volunteers to select and evaluate talks that are being presented to the conference. So if you have any interest in that, you can email them at info@pacificplus.com.
Mm. Are you going to go this year, Rob?
Probably not. It's a far trip.
It is a long trip, yes.
Yeah. How about you, Connor? Have you made it to any of the C++ conferences yet?
No, I've watched a ton of the CppCon videos online, but I've never been to a conference. Maybe my company will send me one year.
Well, so C++ now I don't believe has officially launched registration yet, although it is probably worth checking because I know they were going to do it soon. Yes, if you go to cppnow.org, registration is open. So that's May 6th through the 11th, and if you volunteer, then you can get in free, and also CppCon. If you volunteer, you can get free access. You just have to be willing to help, but you have to pay your trip if you're a volunteer, unless you are a student for those cases.
Right. And then last thing to mention, Meeting C++ has still been putting out videos. Looks like they're up to about 61 videos now. And one of the latest ones to go up is Sean Parent's lightning talks on polymorphic task templates.
Yeah, I think he's actually sent out a tweet saying that there was technically a bug in that code invoking undefined behavior, and then has a follow-up article on that particular one. I think that's right. One of his lightning talks said that.
Okay, I'll have to look for that article.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Conor, I saw your YouTube channel being posted on Reddit RCPP a couple days ago, and I realized that we had never talked about competitive coding on the show, at least not that I remember. So I kind of wanted to learn a little bit more about it. Why don't you start off by telling us how you got interested in competitive coding, though?
Yeah, so my first exposure to competitive programming was actually in my third last semester of university. And at one point I was a double major in computer science, but then I got offered a job, so I dropped the double major and just graduated. But I had taken a number of computer science courses, and I just saw a poster on the wall that said qualifier for this ACM ICPC coding contest. And so I went to it. I didn't really know what I was doing, and I think I solved 2 out of the 5 problems, but I didn't know how to submit them, so I asked the person that was in charge, like, how do I submit? And the guy sort of looked at me being like, what, you solved these problems and haven't submitted them? And so then luckily there was a second qualifier, and I went to that one. At that time I had done a little practice in between and knew how to submit my problems. And then I ended up getting onto one of the my university's teams. So I think they had like the A team, the B team, and the C team. And so I ended up going to one regional contest, and that was sort of it. And then for a number of years I was focusing on my actuarial exams, and but working as a software developer. And since then, I guess a year ago, I sort of started getting back into it, and it's just a great way to develop your data structure and algorithms knowledge. We don't use STL at my company, or at least we're not exposed to like the actual raw data structures. So I sort of have like up until a year ago, I didn't have much experience using it. And so now, yeah, I compete in a lot of the contests, and it's a great way to practice using STL, and yeah, that's how I got into it.
So I'm curious, you said at one time you were a double major with computer science, but I don't believe you actually said what your actual major was.
Oh, so yeah, my initial major was actuarial science.
Okay.
So actuarial science, for those that don't know, it's sort of the study of insurance statistics. So I was told in high school, or asked, do you know what an actuary is? I said no. And they said, oh, you might like it. You're good at math, and you get paid well to do basically math all day long. And so that sort of started me on that track towards that. But then a part of that degree is taking a couple introductory computer science courses. So I hadn't really even heard of computer science in high school, because I went to a small high school. And then I got down to Vancouver. I studied at Simon Fraser, and I took a couple courses there and really, really enjoyed it, but decided to still stay with actuarial science. And then I discovered a job called actuarial software developer, and it was sort of the best of both worlds. So that's what led me into the software world.
That's I have heard that actuarial work can be a well-paying field. Is it also a licensed field? Yeah,
so it's similar to accounting in the sense that you have to write an exam, but accountants only have to write, I think, 1 or 2 exams, and we have 8.
Wow.
And they're pretty rough. You have to study roughly about 400 to 500 hours per exam, and then the pass rates are about 40%. So
oh, wow.
More than half the people after studying for 400 to 500 hours are going to fail.
You said 400 to 500 hours per exam.
And there's 8 exams?
And 8 exams.
Yeah, I'll qualify that by saying the first 5 are considered easier, so you might not need that much for that. But typically, they say it's about 100 hours. 100 hours per hour of the exam. So the first 5 exams are about 3 hours each. So they usually say 200 to 300 hours for those. But the last 3, the fellowship exams, those ones are 5 hours. Or I guess 2 5-hour exams and then 1 2-hour exam. And those ones, yeah, you have to study 400 to 500 hours. Those ones are rough.
So, like, adding this up, it sounds like it's roughly a year of full-time work just to pass the exams. It sounds like you're in the 1,500 to 2,000 hour range or something like that.
Yeah, the last 3 exams they don't offer. They only offer twice a year. So if you fail, well, typically you're studying for about 4 months anyways, and it takes 2 months to grade them. So I do know people that have gotten their FSA in 3 to 4 years, but typically it takes 7, 8 years.
I'm totally fascinated by this. It actually honestly sounds harder than the passing the bar, which my brother-in-law did recently.
I don't know. It depends what your forte is. A lot of actuaries are better at numbers than they are at memorizing and reading stuff. So,
Right.
I'm sure there are some people that could pass the bar that would have trouble with the actuarial exams, but
Sure.
vice versa as well.
Well, that's so. Are the exams mostly just math then?
Yeah, the first 5 they cover topics like probability, financial mathematics, life contingencies, and then the fellowship exams. It depends on the track you take. Those ones are less mathematical, but yeah, it's still very math heavy.
And then you, I assume, have to keep doing continuing education kinds of things and maintaining a license kind of thing with it.
Yeah, once you have your FSA, they have something called the CPD, I think Continuing Professional Development Program, and you have to do X number of hours of readings or attending info sessions and stuff like that.
That sounds considerably more difficult than what I've done. I don't know about you, Rob, but I was required to take 1 statistics class to get my degree in computer science.
I'm not even sure if I took that because I was computer engineering.
Yeah, well, mine was actually statistics and probability for computer engineering, I think is technically what it was.
I think I may have taken 1 statistics class. It was not my favorite. Yeah.
No.
Well, bringing it back to the competitive coding. So I know we mentioned 4 different sites on your bio, and I watched some of your YouTube videos, and those are the ones you seem to follow the most. I'm just kind of curious, what differentiates those sites? I mean, or are they all pretty similar?
Yeah, so I guess before I jump into sort of what the differences are, I haven't really actually even explained what competitive coding is, so I'm not sure all the listeners have heard of it. So essentially, I think according to Wikipedia, they call it a mind sport. I wouldn't really call it that. It sounds a bit odd, but it's basically these websites. They host these contests that typically last an hour to 2 hours, and during that time, you're presented with 3 to 5 problems that are solvable using algorithms and data structures. So usually you're given a little sort of in-browser editor, and you can use the language of your choice to sort of they'll either present you with a function declaration, and then they just ask you to return a number or a vector or something like that. Or different sites will actually make you read the input in yourself, which is a little bit more work. And then the goal is to be able to solve the problems correctly, obviously, and then also as fast as possible. And then based on the site, there's slight differences on how scores work, which I guess I can jump into. So the 4 websites that I cover are HackerRank, LeetCode, topcoder, and Codeforces. So I made a video really detailing the differences between those sites. So I won't go over all of them because I think I cover 14 different features. But at a high level, the differences between those 4 sites is you can sort of group them into 2 categories. So the HackerRank and LeetCode sites are more geared towards everyone. They're a lot easier for beginners to get into, and they're a lot easier to use in general. Whereas topcoder and Codeforces are what a lot of people that are actually doing in-person competitive programming contests they use to train. So that's another thing to mention. I didn't know, so I guess I discovered the ACM ICPC contest, which stands for the Intercollegiate Programming Contest. It's hosted by IBM every year, and it's for college and university students. So I discovered that late in my degree. I wish I had known about it earlier, but for anyone that's listening to this that's a university student and that's interested in coding, I would highly recommend looking into it. And there's also another, and so that the difference between that contest is that one is you work in a team, so it's almost like coding dodgeball, and that you work with 2 other people and you only have 1 computer, so you'll get all 7 problems or 10 problems, and you'll jot them down, and each person sort of has an expertise in the different type of problem category, and so one person will start coding immediately, and the other 2 people will start writing down the solutions to the other ones, and sort of you swap back and forth. And then there's another in-person coding contest called the International Informatics or Olympiad in Informatics, the IOI, and that's for high school students. I once again didn't know about that. If there's any I'm not sure how much of your audience is high school students.
There are some.
But if you're a programmer and you know a high school student that could be interested in this, you can just Google your country and Olympiad Informatics, and each country has their own sort of national program where their students can compete, and then they'll send 1 or 2 teams to the international contest. So yeah, when those 2 contests, the people competing in them are training, they'll use sites like Topcoder and Codeforces because they try to emulate the actual in-person contest. Whereas HackerRank and LeetCode specifically, they gear their site towards preparing for technical interviews. So a lot of people use that site when they are preparing for an interview that they have with Google or Amazon or Facebook, because the questions that you'll get in those interviews are very, very heavy on algorithms and data structures. And so those problems sort of avoid advanced graph theory and anything that relies on heavy knowledge of advanced mathematics. They typically focus on, string questions and something that you'll need a hash table for, or something you'll need to, know what a binary search is for. Whereas Topcoder and Codeforces, they use, they'll cover all problems basically. That's at a high level what the differences between the sites are.
I'm curious about the live coding ones that you mentioned. So that sounds kind of like the place to get an early start if you're in high school or college. What is the end goal, if you will? So you go and you do this competitive programming and you submit your answers, and then they're scored, and then what happens?
So for the I'm not sure about the IOI because I never did that one, but I think the reason people compete in them is at the time they're just interested and they're a lot of fun to do. But at the end of the day, if you end up at the international level competing in the intercollegiate programming contest, you can choose where you want to work basically. I think one of the top, I think he's ranked first on the Codeforces site and either second and third on the Topcoder site currently. He goes by 2 different handles. His name's Gennady and his handle is Tourist. But he competed all throughout, I think, the IOI. If you look at his Wikipedia page, it's, his CV is so long. And so I think he's won multiple times. And he currently, I think, is studying, but he's said in certain posts that he's been offered jobs by Google multiple times and other companies, and he just turns them down. And he said maybe one day he'll be interested. And there's other top people at, Petra is another one. I think he currently works at Google. And speaking of SpaceX, actually, so there's he was before my time, but I've read of a guy. His name is Tomek. So he also was a top guy for a long time, and he used to work at Google, but now works at SpaceX. So I'm not sure if he's a listener. But yeah, so I think the end goal is it's great prep. some people use these online sites because they never did the, either the high school or the university contests. But yeah, it's like if you do well, you're going to have a really easy time finding a job.
Interesting.
I wanted to interrupt this discussion for just a moment to bring you a word from our sponsors. Jason and I had a super interesting podcast with Arno back in January. He's the CTO of ThinkCell, the #1 graphic software used in consulting firms. He's still looking to grow his team, and what they offer is quite appealing. They work on extremely challenging C++ development tasks, and they offer more than pleasant working conditions. With them, you could be working on things like solving linear constraints for automated layout or reverse engineering PowerPoint with IDA. They have a large library of generic algorithms, extending the functionality of STL and Boost, in particular improving boost ranges. So what you contribute could be used immediately throughout their 500,000 lines of product code. They're always using the latest C++ features that are available in the latest version of Visual C++ and Clang. That's because ThinkCell software is cross-platform for Windows and Mac. As for working conditions, I'm talking about no overtime, no meetings, no deadlines, and any technical issues can be discussed directly with Arno. With them, you join a team of 20-plus knowledgeable and creative programmers with a mix of young and experienced developers, coming from 20 different nationalities from all over the world. It's a family-friendly environment, and they pay €120,000 annually after just 1 year. So if you like what you've heard so far, go to thinkcell.com/CppCast to find out all about the job and apply today. So, is C++ kind of the language of choice among these sites, or do some of them just use pseudocode, or some of them allow you to use different languages? How does that usually work?
Yeah, so it's definitely not pseudocode. You have to use an actual language, and it depends on the site. So I actually looked this up, and on Topcoder and Codeforces, it's overwhelmingly C++. So I think I found a post by someone who wrote a script and went and queried all the submissions, and you can check what people are writing in. And that was in 2015, and he found that 87% of people are using C++. And then after that, I think it was 6.2% Java and less than 3% Python, and then the remainder was a plethora of other languages. And the reason for that is that on Topcoder and Codeforces, there's a time limit per question and a memory limit, and that doesn't vary based on the language. So C++ just wins because, what do they say? Speed is king. So on Topcoder and Codeforces, overwhelmingly it's C++. That being said, on HackerRank, they actually, and I guess I should mention, to answer your other question, what are the languages they let you use? There's only 5 on Topcoder. It's Java, C++, C#, VB.NET, and Python. And then on Codeforces, they have a few more. There's 17. They add, D, Haskell, PHP, and some others, JavaScript. And HackerRank has 49. So you name it, you can probably, there's languages I've never heard of. D, these ones, D, Rust, Haskell, Kotlin. But they've got languages like Erlang. They've got something called Brain with a expletive after it. So there's if you want to, Fortran, they've got everything. And on HackerRank, so they actually have custom time limits per language. So they try and even it out. So for C++, it's 2 seconds. For Python, it's 10 seconds, and for Java, it's 4 seconds.
This is the actual execution time.
Yeah, so I think the way it works is that the OJ, what they call the online judge, it can process up to like 10 to the 8 operations or sort of elements a second. So a lot of the times, the easier problems, you don't need to worry about complexity, but you know that if you have input that is a 10 to the 5th and you have a quadratic solution, like that's going to time out, or what they call time limit exceeded. So like based on the length of the input that you're given and like the number of operations you have to do, you can sort of work out, reverse engineer, like what is the complexity of the algorithm that you need to use in order to successfully pass the problem. That being said, I think on HackerRank, it's hard to find the statistics for that, but there was a post by HackerRank, and it seemed like Java was the #1 at roughly 30%, and then C++ and Python had roughly 20% each. And I couldn't find anything for LeetCode. They don't even actually mention anything about their time limits. But I have seen posts where like a certain solution will work for C++, and then someone will post the corresponding code in Java, and then someone using Python will say Python doesn't work, it times out. So I think C++ in general is used more often on average across the sites.
I love C++. I use it every day. I teach it, but I have to say it seems a little unfair if it does not include the compilation time on the compiled languages.
Yeah.
I mean, you only have to compile once.
Yeah, but still.
I've been thinking about that because now with all the const expert stuff, you technically write some code that generates your solutions, pre-computes them. I do know that I think that at the ICPC contest, they do have rules around that, because when I competed in regionals, I think there was a guy that tried to there's a queue when you're getting your solutions processed. So if someone submits and another guy submits, you get in line, and some person was trying to ruin the line by basically creating some code that took forever to compile. And so, while they weren't submitting, they were trying to block other people from submitting, and they got in trouble.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Though I am curious too, though, for real, almost all the languages you mentioned, they've had fairly recent large upgrades to the language that changed things, like C++ 11, 14, 17, and you've Python 3 caused a pretty big upset. Do they let you choose what standard you can use for these, or?
It depends on the site, but definitely on Codeforces, you actually not only get to choose, well, I guess you choose your compiler. So they got one for C++ 11, they got one for C++ 14. None of the sites support C++ 17 yet. But yeah, HackerRank, they've got Python 3. So you get to choose which version. Not for all languages, but for the popular ones, yeah.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you've talked about how the in-person conferences can be, or in-person competitive coding can be really great for kind of building up your CV, your resume. And some of these sites are just good for practicing for interviews. Is there any other kind of more tangible benefits, just by competing in topcoder or Codeforces and being on the top of the rank? Would that look pretty good on your resume too?
Yeah, definitely. The two main benefits of competitive programming are, one, the technical prep you get for interviews, but two, depending on the site, some of them actually have sponsored contests. So I know HackerRank had a Goldman Sachs sponsored contest a couple weeks ago. Sometimes it's location based, so you have to be in a certain country to qualify for an interview. But they'll say, top 10 people in this contest get an interview. On top of that, I'm not sure if recruiters are supposed to do this, but I definitely know that recruiters will directly reach out just purely based on your competitive programming profile on a site. So if you do well enough and you're high enough on a leaderboard, they will just reach out to you and message you. So they'll create an account and say, "Hey, I'm a recruiter at Google. Would you like to interview?" And so it's great for career opportunities. I think, on top of that, it also, you just become a better programmer. A lot of times, for LeetCode, if you submit your code and it fails, it'll give you the test case that it failed on. So immediately you'll be able to see, the corner case that you missed. But on the other three sites, when you submit, at least on HackerRank and Codeforces, it'll test your code on a subset of the system testing, which is all the test cases. And so you could fail even though they'll give you 2 or 3 test cases, so you think you've written it correctly. And so you have to figure out what's the edge case that I missed. So it helps you develop the ability to identify edge cases in the code that you're writing that you're not thinking about. It helps you learn how to optimize your code. You'll write an algorithm, realize it wasn't efficient enough, and you think about, how could I be writing this more efficiently? Things like that.
Do any of them have cash prizes?
Yeah, so I think the top in topcoder, they have a whole ongoing sort of tournament throughout the year, and then it ends in the TCO, the Top Coder Open, which is like, the best of the best. And I think I definitely know this year, which is actually part of the reason that I decided to make the YouTube channel. But they might have done it last year as well. They actually have live commentating on the contest, which is very interesting because you at that level, when you've got the best people in the world, at Top Coder, it's a 75-minute contest, and there's only 3 problems, and the problems are very, very difficult. Like, they involve a lot of high-level mathematics and dynamic programming, and usually they're very involved. So it's not just it's 3 problems in one or 4 problems in one. And so for the first 20 or 30 minutes of the contest, you're just sitting there, and they've got this leaderboard that shows who's submitted a solution, but nothing happens for like the first 20 or 30 minutes of the contest. And so it's interesting to see what the commentator says. But some people are speculating that it's going to become like the next esports. Esports is sort of becoming really big now, and they have live commentating on some games now, and this could be the next thing. And so, so you asked, is there cash prizes? Mm-hmm. So I think TCO, their cash prize is $5,000 for first place. So, you're not gonna be able to retire off of your competitive programming winnings. But there are there's other sites that I know that some people that compete on competitive programming, they do make more money off of those sites. So on Top Coder, they have ongoing challenges that aren't actual competitive programming contests, but they're more like, we have this app that we need to be written. It's a contest, and it's like $1,000 for the first place, or they've got some sort of user interface that needs to be designed. It's $1,000 for the first place. And so if you can go and look, and at any given time, there's 40 or 50 outstanding challenges, all varying from $500 to $2,000 a first place prize.
Wow.
And there's also, I'm sure you guys have heard of Kaggle.
No, I have not.
I'm not sure if I have.
Oh, so yeah, Kaggle is very similar to HackerRank, but it's like HackerRank for data science. So you're using mostly like R and Python to solve like artificial intelligence, machine learning problems. And their prizes are ridiculous. So for a long time, Department of Homeland Security had a $1.5 million prize for a top algorithm on, or I'm not sure if it was all paid out. Probably it wasn't all paid out to one person, but like that was the prize pool for like passenger screening. I think I saw.
Okay.
It's the defense. I'm in Canada, but defense spending going to the right place, I guess. And I've seen other contests. There was a $1.2 million one for home value prediction, I think. That was put on by a company called Zillow. And then there's other ones, like I think I've seen Mercedes. A lot of car companies, they'll put some recognition or computer vision for self-driving cars and whatnot, and they'll have like $50,000 prizes and $30,000 prizes, and there's actually like teams of people and companies that are competing for this money. So yeah, there's contests out there that you can win a lot, but pure competitive programming, I don't think I don't think you're going to be able to make that much on a consistent basis, at least.
That's pretty wild. I didn't know about the data science ones for sure.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Well, are you currently still competing in these, or just following now?
No. So yeah, I compete. I work, so obviously there's a lot of contests during the week that I can't compete in. But LeetCode, their contests are regularly scheduled, so they're every Saturday night, 9:30 Eastern time. So I typically try and write that one, and whenever the other sites have contests that are not during work hours, I'll enter those. And a couple of the websites too, they let you can compete virtually like afterwards. So a lot of times if I have to make a video on some of them, I'll go and compete virtually as if it were the contest, and it doesn't impact your ranking, but you still get to do the problems as if it were a contest. So
you mentioned 9 p.m. Eastern, and you're in Canada, so that's Eastern North America time. Do you know if there's any of these competitions that are held for our European listeners and times that would be good for them?
Yes, well, so on all three of the other sites, the contests are scheduled all over the place. So Codeforces, I know, they're like a Russian-based site. And some of their contests are like 5 a.m. our time, and they're at crazy hours. But I assume they're normal hours for Russia and Europe.
Right.
It's all perspective. And there are, on HackerRank, one of their contests is called a Week of Code, where every day for a week they'll release a problem at 2 a.m. and then you have you can solve it at any point during the week, but each day that goes by, the score of the problem decreases by 10%. Anyway, so those problems you can solve at any point in that 24-hour period after the 2 a.m. release. So there's contests that go for an hour or two, and there's some contests that go for a week long. So it doesn't really matter where you are in the world; you can still compete in them.
This kind of everything that you've said makes me think this seems kind of like Stack Overflow in a way, although it's an actual competition. So if the contest is released at 2 a.m., I'm guessing you have to have the answer in by like 2:45 if you actually want to like win.
By 45, do you mean like 45 minutes past the hour?
Yeah, basically like 45 minutes later, because if you actually submit your thing like a day later, then everyone else has already like submitted their answers, so the week doesn't. Am I exaggerating the situation?
Well, no, I was going to say like the top guys, they solve. It depends on the difficulty level of the problem, but it's minutes. Or well, I guess 45 is a minute, but like
right.
For instance, like on the LeetCode contest, that's an hour-and-a-half contest, and there's typically 4 problems, and average person will solve 2 to 3 of them in that 90-minute period. But the top people on the site, they're done all 4 problems in like 20 minutes.
Wow.
And they'll submit the first one in like, it can be seconds, that, a lot of the, I don't want to call them professional competitive programmers, but they train like so much during university while they're preparing for the ICPC to be able to crack those easy problems out in literally seconds. And like they'll recognize a problem as just a variation of another problem they've seen before. So it's not even like they have to think about it. It's like a reflex.
Okay.
And yeah, so the top people are super fast. Yeah.
I am curious how much the ability to answer those questions very quickly translates to productivity and like a real company. Like, have you worked with any of the top ranked people? Not that you have to give names or anything, but I'm just
definitely I haven't worked with them. I know that there's a couple people at my workplace that have sort of dabbled in competitive programming, but I haven't worked with them. I definitely know it does help in terms of the ability to debug, but a lot of times when you're working in a code base, it's completely different, right? You're understanding a framework and making a refactoring change or something like that. You're not starting from scratch.
Right.
So that being said, like it definitely helps. There's also one of the comments I got from a Redditor was that I was doing a bunch of things wrong that I shouldn't do. One of them being, I shouldn't using namespace std. The other one, I shouldn't be using macros. The other one was I shouldn't be using, type aliases or type defs, which are all true statements for, maybe a code base. But for competitive programming, you're trying to go as fast as possible. So using a macro that shaves off, like a lot of the top guys, they'll define a macro BE for begin and E or B for begin and E for end, and they'll have macros for their for loops and all of the types, like unsigned long that's ULL and long is LL, and they'll have like type deft or a type alias now. Like a vector of ints is VI, a vector of strings is VS. And so a lot of times when you're reading this code, it's it's very, very difficult to read. And so that's what the Redditor's comment was that, when you're defining a macro for your for loop, now I need to know what your macro means. And I said that was a good point. And so in my videos now, like, I don't use macros. But for the actual competition, you definitely should be if you're trying to compete at a high level, because every character stroke of your keyboard matters. So some of the top guys' code is very, it looks not even like C++.
Do any of them like just copy in, like they start the problem and just copy in their macros?
Yeah, that's usually, I'm not sure what the rules are. I think LeetCode, maybe you're not supposed to do that, but definitely on topcoder, you're actually, when you watch the topcoder open, you can see them actually going, they're allowed to use like any and all resources. So they can go to Geeks for Geeks, they can go to Wolfram Alpha if they need to check out some sort of, math integration or derivation or something. And a lot of times they'll copy and paste in a lot of code. So there's certain problems that require like modular arithmetic. Like, so it'll be some combinatorial problem, and they'll say, return the number of combinations of whatever the problem is, modulus, 10 to the power of 9 plus 7. And so if you have to write your algorithm always taking the modulus, and for, division and multiplication, and exponents, it's all different. A lot of them just they copy and paste in, a type deft type called mint, that when you use that type, it just automatically takes care of all the modular arithmetic. So yeah, there's a lot of tricks. I definitely don't know them all because I haven't been doing it as long as those guys at the top have. But every once in a while, like, you can go and you can look at what the top guys code looks like, and it's you see some interesting things.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So on your YouTube channel, you go over some of the problems in these contests and, show your answers to them. Are you taking those answers from some of these top programmers, or are you coming up with the answers on your own?
Typically what I try to do, because I'm also using this as like an opportunity for, me to improve as well, is half the problems that I cover are problems that I solve myself. And I always compare it with other people's code to make sure that, I didn't miss something completely obvious. But a lot of the times on those problems, it's similar solutions to what other people got. And the other half, I try to focus on problems that, like, I had trouble with, that I either partially solved but didn't completely solve, or that I missed something on. And that requires, spending a lot of time reading other people's code. And actually, so that's sort of the reason that I started this YouTube channel, similar to the reason you guys started this podcast. Is I think at one point you guys said you were looking around for a C++ podcast, and there wasn't really one, so you just decided to start it. And I was, the way they say you can improve in these contests is to, read other people's code and sort of look at solutions to problems that you are not able to currently get, because just doing problems that you know how to do doesn't help you improve. It just helps you get a bit quicker. And so I looked around, because reading people's code can be tedious at times, and I figured there'd be some sort of tutorial resource or some videos out there, but there wasn't really. So I figured if I'm looking for this, I'm sure there's other people out there looking for it as well. And yeah.
All right.
Okay. Well, is there anything else you wanted to share before we let you go, Connor?
No. I think that we covered a lot.
Okay. Well, obviously we're going to be putting links to your YouTube channel in the show notes. But where can people find you online? Are you on Twitter, Facebook, or anything?
Yeah, I'm just on Twitter and YouTube and GitHub. Code_report is both the Twitter and the YouTube handle, I guess.
All right.
Okay. Well, it's been great having you on the show today.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me, guys.
Sure. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for listening in as we chat about C++. I'd love to hear what you think of the podcast. Please let me know if we're discussing the stuff you're interested in. Or if you have a suggestion for a topic, I'd love to hear about that too. You can email all your thoughts to feedback@cppcast.com. I'd also appreciate if you like CppCast on Facebook and follow CppCast on Twitter. You can also follow me at Rob W. Irving and Jason at LeftKiss on Twitter. And of course, you can find all that info and the show notes on the podcast website at CppCast.com. Theme music for this episode is provided by podcastthemes.com. website at CppCast.com. Theme music for this episode is provided by podcastthemes.com.